In the fall, look way up into the chosen sky. Look high over Tower Point, and you frequently will see turkey vultures. You'll see them as dark shadows turning in a widening gyre, like Tolkien's Nazgul. And by sight and by sound, these big black birds zero in on dead lambs in a field or a road-killed deer in a ditch. Yet, for us, it's such a grand sign of fall to see these great birds slowly circling in the sky, waiting to catch a thermal to carry them across the strait and far south for winter. You could call these buzzards snowbirds, heading for warmer climes, but they remind me of courtroom lawyers, barristers. Turkey vulture. Hanging by a thread, tarred and feathered, scalded head over tattered black silk, it mocks the open court of air, ratcheting down to the reek of condemned meat. Unsightly as the corpse, an epicure at death's red feast. It feeds, sickle-beaked, entering at the eye. After that rough justice, it creaks west to roost on a gallows tree. Like some lawyers, drummers have a bad rep for being maniacs, and that is a completely undeserved slur on drummers. But I couldn't get that out of my head one day while I was walking in the woods, and I heard this maniacal slamming, which resulted in this poem called Red Pileated Woodpecker. Headbanger, mohawked, with a buzzsaw guffaw, flaps over the mosh pit to batter dead wood. Punk bird, bashing its drum kit, blind rage aimed at grubs, burrowing away from mayhem. There are many fish in the waters off Tower Point, and the Bullhead Sculpin was the first fish that I ever caught. I was 8 years old and I was using shellfish flesh as a lure. And the sculpin is a spiny, inedible creature, but to an 8-year-old down at an abandoned dock, it is a jumbo prize. Bullhead Sculpin first appeared in Train Poetry magazine. Bullhead Sculpin. From murky water between tarred pilings through a dark labyrinth of currents, the Bullhead Sculpin spirals to lush bait torn from a mussel's gunmetal shell. Ripe flesh draped like a matador's undulating cape over the bright, barbed hook that pierces a scaled lip and forces the horned fish up through a helix of cross currents to corkscrew flailing, gills splayed, gasping into the sear maze of air. Let's turn to the case of the Vancouver Island Wolverine. It is a subspecies that's probably extinct, but there was never much of an outcry about its disappearance. This ornery scavenger was sometimes called the glutton or the hyena of the north. The island's wolverine is a huge weasel that reeked of musk and roadkill and sometimes would raid trap lines and hen houses. It was definitely unloved, unlike, say, the Vancouver Island marmot. That's a cheery, fuzzy icon. It sunbathes in the alpine and it whistles while it works. Vancouver Island wolverine. Skunk bear stinking of dead meat. No cuddly poster child for the imperiled wild. Unseen for half a century, down to one straggler dodging deadfall. None captive bred, none loosed to wreak havoc on trappers. Embedded in crag, denned in talus, it became its own cache of carrion, and never was missed. The less said of monsters, the better. Never was missed. The less said of monsters, the better. A smaller cousin to the wolverine is the pine marten. It's a tree weasel with a cute kitty cat face. And like feral cats, the pine marten lives on little rodents like mice and like squirrels. This poem was published in a children's magazine out of Ireland called Caterpillar. The poem is called Pine Marten. He catches squirrels on the fly, fearless of all except other weasels, which explains why he hisses at me. By my noisy passage through his property, I made every rodent nervous and wary, or thoughtlessly sent them scurrying madly for the nearest burrow or nook, cranny or hole. Speaking of the caterpillar, my last poem is about the woolly bear caterpillar. The season of fall is here, and it is a time when you can see the tubby, woolly bear caterpillar trundling along the ground. It will overwinter, having antifreeze in its tissues. This plump and whiskery worm has its coming out party in the spring, turning into an elegant moth. Woolly bear caterpillar. An idler dawdles along the late fall path. A dull glutton, he confronts the coming of hunger and cold through girth and bristles, his shelter of pelt. His barometer coat, shaggy as a Cossack hat. The darker the bands, the harder the winter. He will dig in against ice, against siege, to emerge stiff and creaky as a rusted hinge, and starved in the famine of first spring, its brittle air, before dwindling to the leanness of moth, before floating on the thin dream of wings. Most of the poems that I just read are found in my book called Cries from the Ark, which is available through Brick Books. And my website is danmaciaasc.com, and on that website you can find links to other poems found online as well as to Brick Books. Thank you.